And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. Today we're going to talk about week 2 recap. Here it is. Uh yeah, and see, remember when there were people out there that were like, oh man, the week 2 slate so much worse than the week 1 slate. What? There were so many good games this weekend, including a couple absolute stinky, smelly underdogs coming in big time. Obviously, the headliner one, NIU defeats Notre Dame, who's a top 5 team. Which, look, I have my top 25 rankings pulled up here, CD, and I did not have Notre Dame as a top 5 team, and in fact, I did not have them as a top 15 team. And since then, they are out of my top 25. But the AP polls still got them top 20. How do we feel about that?
I mean, I I I don't know. So everyone wants to make it okay, they're out of the playoffs. And listen, I think they should be unless Northern Illinois is the G5 team that makes the playoffs. Because then it's like, I guess they didn't. But again, like if Northern Illinois goes, 8-4, right, which is really respectable, really, really good, but it's the MAC, they should be out. Absolutely should be out, especially not playing a conference title game, right? Especially with the schedule they have. Now they will have opportunities, right, against pretty solid teams. USC could be highly ranked by the time they play them and have another opportunity to win. But again, I know your win last week, super impressive, but again, here we are with Marcus Freeman. Here we are again, another G5 loss at home.
Let me ask you
Embarrassing.
this. Let me ask you this, CD. Say, I don't know, Toledo, okay, wins out, but their only loss of the season is to NIU. Are they the G5 representative to go to the playoffs?
Well, I mean, you, I don't know. I mean, so many things has to go wrong. Like, I have no idea because like Boise State's looking pretty good, right? And you've got some
I'm just saying, I'm
American
trying to,
team.
for a comparison, like this Notre Dame schedule might end up not being that good. Like USC might end up being the best team that they play all year on this schedule. We'll see about Texas A&M, especially next weekend when they play a Florida team that looked pretty terrible week 1, and they're going on the road for that game. Look, I mean, if Texas A&M does not pull through and look very good, I don't think Notre Dame should be a playoff team. That is my opinion. But I don't know.
No,
I think
I'm
there's still a
with
lot
you
of football
here.
left. I'm still think there's a lot of football left. Because like think about it this way, like if Toledo, and I don't know what Toledo's schedule looks like off the top of my head, but if their only loss was to Northern Illinois, who I guess now is a ranked football team, uh, which is its own conversation, but Toledo will have a ranked win, which Notre Dame will have like one or two of, and they will have won a conference championship. So I don't know. And 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 I don't know. Actually, that's pretty much it. Like I just don't see how Notre Dame one. I don't have them ranked in my top 25, and I think people are going to call me an overreactor. But I didn't have them in my top 15 before that, so that's where I'm at. Just other games this weekend because I don't want to just stick on that game, which by the way was an awesome game. Riley Leonard.
Can we give our props to Northern Illinois real quick
Oh
before we
yeah,
just talk on Notre
Ethan.
Dame? He is so fun to watch. Ontari Brown before he got hurt, he was so fun to watch. I was super, super impressed with how they flew around the field defensively. Right, Notre Dame's offense did not look good in week 1. Right, they ran the ball a little bit well in the fourth quarter, but it did not look good at all in week 2 at home. Right, trying to get right, and then I just loved the way that they attacked Notre Dame defense. A really good defense, and yes, they didn't put up a ton of yards and points, but they did enough. They were successful on third downs. It was awesome. I mean, a ton of credit goes to Northern Illinois, who, by the way, didn't they win the MAC just a couple years ago? Right, I think 2020 year they won the MAC and or 2021. Regardless, though, Thomas Hammock, man, big time win for them and that program and the MAC and G5. How about that? How about our G5s there trying to get phased out
Yeah,
of college football? And here they are making their statement. Boise State almost had a statement, after midnight on the West Coast there against Oregon. let's go. I was at watching that game. My buddies, we were watching that game, and it was really, really fun to see them battle back, even after going down and to stop, go down, score a field goal, and win the football game. And a tough field goal too at the end.
Yeah, it was. All the credit in the world to that program. And moving forward, I guess people are gonna have a big eye on them because they're a top 25 ranked team right now. Bowling Green taking Penn State down to the wire there. The first half of Bowling Green, they looked really good, and then Penn State was like, okay, we're gonna play some real football here. And I think in the second half, you saw what really probably should have looked like the entire game. Penn State outscoring Bowling Green 14-3, which doesn't sound like that impressive, but uh,
When you were down at half, it
yeah, when
is.
when you're down at half, that's a big deal. So yeah, credit the MAC in general, dude, was just ferocious yesterday. Ferocious. So I think Ohio also snuck out a win too against South Alabama. Yeah, they did.
They
27 to
did.
20, where Bishop Davenport getting the start over there at quarterback for South Carolina or South Alabama. Navarro, Tyus, Hendricks getting it done over there for Ohio. Yeah, the MAC. I'm impressed with the MAC. I have been impressed with the Mountain West. I haven't as much been impressed with the Sun Belt yet, the way I thought I was going to be. Um, they just don't have like a statement win yet, I guess. This is one I could think of off the top of my head.
It's more about a couple of, ugly losses too. Yeah, that Bowling Green, first of all, by the way, if you watch our show back in the summer, you know about Harold Fannin Jr. That guy was a
Yeah.
monster. That guy's a legit power four, Big Ten body. I was really impressed and happy that Bowling Green hung on to him and was able to. And you're seeing guys like Ashton Janty. You're seeing Ethan Hampton, Ontario Brown, like really good football players in the G5 because of that retention piece that some of these schools have. Being able to do that's awesome. It is awesome. Connor Bazelak was awesome. Penn State, though, did what Notre Dame should have done. You are at home. You take an opponent. You have a great week one win, right, on the road against West Virginia. Notre Dame did the same thing with the A&M. And you come back home and you're flat to start the game. You have to be able to turn it on in the second half. And Penn State did. They shut them down defensively. They started running the ball, had explosive plays. Like that's what it should have been for Notre Dame, and it wasn't. And is that Marcus Freeman? Is that a talent problem? I don't know, but you got to give credit to Penn State. I think in that second half, I saw a lot from them. Obviously, not the outcome you wanted because you want to cover, you want to win, you want to empty your bench. Obviously, and it's a long season, what's hoping to be for Penn State. But the reality is you kind of got tested early. And even though it was Bowling Green, you were able to flex your muscles and pull
What
away. And
wasn't the game you thought you were going to be tested in?
no, no, but you know what? That's fine because Penn State, again, like the Big Ten, and I think we'll talk about it here. There's some frisky teams, I think, in that tier three, which I was not expecting. I was really impressed with Illinois. I've been really impressed with USC, and you might be able to move them up to tier two, right? You've seen good things like obviously Penn State doesn't play Michigan State, but does anyone want to play Aiden Childs? I don't think so. Right,
Nebraska?
obviously Wisconsin, Nebraska, you mentioned took care of their business. We will see, man. We will see, but you gotta love it. You gotta
I'm
love it.
I want to go over to the ACC now. Talk about that Georgia Tech Syracuse game. Yeah, Kyle McCord got it done, dude. And you know what? They have weapons there at Syracuse. They have weapons, and that defense did enough. They had a lead, and they just held on to it. That's all they had to do late in that game, and they were able to get that done. It was awesome, man. I thought Kyle McCord looked fantastic. Rondé Gadsden being back is such a big deal for that Syracuse team.
Yeah.
Such a big deal. And look, I didn't think Haynes King was atrocious. I didn't think he was atrocious at all. I think Syracuse just played a really nice game, and they were the better football team that day.
I gotta give credit to them, especially at home coming out and beating a ranked Georgia Tech team. And they were a team I was just like very, very nervous about going this year because so much change, so much overhaul. Common Core comes in. How's it all going to mesh together? And it did. And they looked really, really good, both sides of the football. We like their staff there, obviously, especially long term there with Fran Brown and the talent he can compile. But it sounds like in year one, he did a good job there. And in an ACC, where if you don't get Miami until the last week in November, you could have done a ton of winnable football games, especially with how Grayson McCall and NC State looked, especially with how Virginia Tech has looked. I mean, there's a lot of winnable football games on the Syracuse schedule that we already thought was easy, but now it's kind of turned into wow. I mean, you're talking about deep November run where they could be in the ACC championship conversation, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but obviously that's kind of what you look to after a big time win against Georgia Tech. Yeah, you mentioned Gadsden. He had 2 red zone touchdowns. That's a huge, huge get. I mean, isn't it nice for Syracuse fans to have a quarterback, right? And also to have weapons that you can throw the ball in the red zone too. It is awesome. And we talked about that Ohio State divorce and whatever with Kyle McCord, and I think both parties can be really happy. I think Ohio State loves their quarterback room. I think Syracuse loves their quarterback room. Like I don't think it's just because you didn't work out at Ohio State as being an elite quarterback for them to take them over the top doesn't mean you can't be a really good Power 4 quarterback. He was awesome. Again, to me, I with Georgia Tech, like they needed to run the football well, and Haynes King did. Jamal Haynes did not. Neither did the running backs. To me, that's what I look for. Is like you saw them go kind of low in that third quarter. That's where I want to see their running backs, play well. And I thought, look, Quinn Allen, Will Nixon, those are good football players, and they really got going there as well.
What about talking about the three-team trade, I guess, at quarterback? Not Kansas State, Avery Johnson, kind of in a little bit of a barn burner there with Tulane late. And Avery Johnson didn't exactly look like what we thought maybe Avery Johnson was going to look like, or at least the locals in Kansas State, in Manhattan. So, what are your thoughts there? I don't think it's time to overreact by any means, but it was certainly something to watch.
They went on the road and they played a really well coached, talented football team, and they snuck out a victory. Now, to be honest, I still think Tulane probably should have, or at least deserved to tie up that football game. Avery Johnson was still 15 to 23. Now he missed some passes, obviously, but he had some explosive plays. He found some guys open. You know, they I mean, he had 40 more yards on the ground. They ran the ball well with Giddens and Edwards. So, like, what's the panic here? You scored 34 points. To me, it's like, where's that defense? You talked about it preseason. You talked about it was the Kansas State have a defense that we trust to go in, week out to win the Big 12. I think Utah does. I don't know who else in the Big 12 does have that kind of defense that's going to be able to travel week in and week out, especially looking at Kansas State's schedule. Next week, we got a big time game. I think Friday night against Arizona at home. You're also playing a couple of really talented offenses with Oklahoma State and Colorado and Kansas. Dare I say Arizona State after a nice win this weekend. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kansas State, they got the win, and you can kind of just check that off and just forget about it. And now you move in to conference play. Although I think the Arizona game is not a conference game necessarily. It doesn't
Yeah,
count for one. But again, you're playing a Big 12 opponent.
yeah. And Arizona honestly hasn't looked maybe as good against two very inferior opponents. So I'm really interested to see how that game turns out and what that Arizona offense is going to look like against a team that's because it really didn't feel like they opened it up at all against Northern Arizona. But
I think
yeah,
they were missing some guys. I think they were holding guys out and kind of just like we should be able to beat this team with what we have and let's get healthy and get ready to win because their biggest tests are these next couple weeks with Arizona. You look at their schedule, it's Kansas State and Utah on the road. And then after that, it really opens up. Obviously, some losable football games like the Big 12 is full of, regardless. So, yeah, you want to be healthy for these next 2 weeks.
any other games you want to talk about right now?
Before we get out of here, I mean, you got to credit Clemson, real quick for bouncing back against
Yeah,
App State. App State's a team that has given a lot of Power Five teams, especially on that East Coast there in the Carolinas, problems. And they did very well there. Obviously, we'll get to a lot of other games that we did preview, so stick tuned for that. But Michigan State, how about them against
yeah,
Maryland? I thought, and I don't even think Billy Edwards was the problem too. I just thought
no,
there was a day where it was just Childs just making big time throws. Nick Marsh being a difference maker for them, which we talked about, potentially would be an awesome thing for that, that offense there.
Missing that field
Damn,
goal
man.
was huge in the fourth quarter. It was
Yeah.
a big swing there because you were about to go up 10 with just a couple minutes to go, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where Aiden Childs just finds a way to score a touchdown, and you got to go, and Michigan State just gets it done, dude. That was an impressive win on the road, playing against a team. Which, by the way, I think Maryland's defense is really good. I don't think Aiden Childs necessarily like exposed them. I think he made play because Aiden Childs had some mistakes. Lord knows he made some mistakes in that game, but that was a very impressive performance, I thought, from Jonathan Smith's Michigan State Spartans. And of course, that was one of our best bets of the week in Maryland minus 8.5. Didn't work out for me that one, but the rest of mine looked pretty good. We'll get into that later, I guess. What about Oklahoma? They hitting the panic button?
No, but I'm concerned. I no longer am going to be betting them because if you watched the show last week, I had them. I was like, I can get them 28 and a half. I was like, are you kidding me? That
And then I was like, that
against a
sounds great.
terrible Houston
Sign
team.
me
Yeah,
up.
you're gonna hop on it, and Jackson Arnold never looked comfortable. They just couldn't pull away. I was like waiting. I was waiting. And they did it. They didn't even score any offensive points in that second half. What was it? A safety or something right at the end. I mean, I guess credit Houston, and I know that's a good coaching staff there. New coaching staff fighting for culture after an embarrassing week one loss to UNLV, a UNLV team that, by the way, put up like 70 points against Deacon Hill and Utah Tech, by the way. But
Yeah,
regardless, so
I'm not hitting the panic
yeah,
button either, but
no,
I'm
yeah,
monitoring Seth Luttrell over there and how big of a loss actually is Jeff Levy because it's hard to quantify, I guess. But I think in the next couple of weeks we might be starting to see how big of either they get it together or the Jeff Levy loss was way overlooked.
yeah, yeah. A couple more really interesting P5 games I thought that were really entertaining. Pitt at Cincinnati. Cincinnati blew that football game.
22
I was
unanswered.
unbelievable. As a guy that owns Cincinnati's over 5.5, very, very nervous for that because all of a sudden I saw them winning. And I was like, oh, great. I do not trust Eli Holstein and Pitt to come from behind. I trust Cincinnati to be able to get after the quarterback. I trust them to go run the football with Corey Kiner, and it just didn't quite happen in the second half. And then Virginia getting a win over Wake Forest. And what, by the way, Wake Forest, who I thought played pretty well too at home. It's just that, Bachmeyer had over 400 yards. Donovan Green, nice to see him back and healthy for Wake Forest. But again,
The fumble late was
yeah,
brutal. And I was a guy holding a Virginia +2 ticket. And honestly, that's one of those, hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. But impressive resilience though by Virginia because they went down pretty big and it looked like it was kind of over. I had it up on my monitor. It was a bottom corner monitor, because monitor. And I'm like, okay, well, Virginia +2 is dead. Here we go. But then Anthony Calandria, man, and then making plays when they need to that fourth down on the goal, dude. That was a Brazilian effort from the Cavaliers there.
we talked about Virginia, having to go with Calandra because he can elevate this team and Tony Muskett can't. They just did not run the ball. 2.6 yards per carry. Yeesh. And you have to go. Calandra has to go 33 for 43, 350 plus yards, 3 tutties. I know he had 2 interceptions, but hey, it's Calandria. You're gonna get that. Fields looked awesome. He's got to have in our fantasy league. Very, very excited about that. But I guess credit to Hank Bachmeier, right? That's the best I've seen him look in a long time, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he looked really nice. It's nice when you have weapons like Don Green, Taylor Moore,
Oh yeah.
that are just Taylor Moore, forget, but really good talents there over by Wake Forest. And Claiborne, we said it in the previews, he's a really good runner. He's a
I will
really,
say
really good runner.
he is. I will say that one of the least impressive 2-0 teams to me right now is Arkansas State. And I know they were a wagon last
Yeah.
year, and we love Jalen Rayner, but they should have lost last week to Central Arkansas, who's albeit a very good FCS football team. But then you go down to core record, does it again late in the fourth quarter. I mean,
Or third
you're
quarter.
looking at, or I guess I'm sorry, yeah, third quarter. But yeah, yeah, my bad there. But it's just Tulsa's not a team that scares me at all. And I guess it's an American football team, so you know what? It's not a terrible win. And obviously, Arkansas State, with their schedule, this was one you really wanted to win because your other two out of conference games are Michigan and Iowa State. Michigan is probably going to be upset, let off some steam on you. An Iowa State team that just beat Iowa on the road. And then you get into the conference play with a bunch of winnable games on the schedule, by the way. So they were looking at a team that's definitely hoping, definitely with bowl aspirations. This was a win that you would love to have, and you did get it, I guess. So you don't look back, and it doesn't matter how much you win by, it's just if you do win, I guess. But
James Madison also 2-0 in the Sun Belt. Didn't look great against Gardner Webb there. Southern Miss, I mean, tough. I just think a lot of these teams in the Sun Belt that I thought, like South Alabama, 0-2. I thought that they were going to be pretty decent. The best 0-2 team in the Sun Belt might be Old Dominion, playing South Carolina close and then playing East Carolina close. Just not getting it done in the fourth quarter there. Really only scoring. I mean, offensively, Old Dominion struggles, right? And App State losing by 60 as well. I just feel Troy struggling like in their opening game. The Sun Belt feels wide open to me. It feels wide open. And I didn't think I was going to be saying that, but I have no clue. I have no clue who's going to win the Sun Belt. Feels like it's kind of a toss up. I guess, I mean, is your favorite right now to win the Sun Belt? Is it still App State?
listen, I was a guy that
Probably.
my upset. I mean, yes, probably, but you can't take too much from a team as talented as Clemson playing to their potential. Of course, they're going to rail App State. That's going to happen. I will say I've been impressed with Texas State. I thought what they did last week to UTSA was really nice. Jordan McLeod there, GJ Kinney. But I was impressed with Louisiana. I will say I was wrong. I had them on upset alert this week as a big time favorite against Kansas State, and they kind of flexed their muscles. That was good stuff to see. And encouraging sign to see there.
Last one I want to talk about before we can move on to our upset alerts, best bet recap, and then the games that we previewed, their recaps. Um, Alabama playing against South Florida at home. What what a soft thing. I'm sorry, Alex Golish. I really like him as a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like he was just trying to play it close,
He's
so
trying to
that
cover.
just trying to play it close, so that when interviews come around for that Florida job next year or Arkansas job or whatever it is that he wants, that he can. It's like, oh yeah, look how well I played Bama. Look what I'm glad that Bama ran it up, dude. You kicked a field goal there on fourth and goal, down 8 in the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes to go against Alabama on the road. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. How is it that you're not trying to score a touchdown right there? I don't know, because you don't know the next time you're gonna get down there, by the way, right? Anything can happen.
No.
You just I thought that was ridiculous. But then you saw the talent of Bama just overwhelm them in the fourth quarter. Ryan Williams, unreal. Kobe Prentice, Jam Miller, those
Yeah.
guys just kind of popped off there in the fourth quarter. But I was extremely disappointed. Now it's Golish. Not that South Florida would have won. I just think that kind of mentality is just settling for a field goal there to make it making a one possession game. Like, come on, what are we talking about here? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, they host Miami in a couple weeks, and obviously, anything can happen right on any given day, but you cannot have that kind of mentality with Miami coming in. And that's a game we've seen Mario Cristobal teams kind of lose. It's totally a game that's on there. And yeah, I'm with you on that. You go down and Milrow when he was forced to drop back and pass, right? Great. He really did not. And that O line did not look great, which is again its own thing concerning. And we'll see. I think we'll learn more this week again, going on the road to Wisconsin. But there's 6 minutes to go, just about, and you go down, you score a touchdown, you tie the game, you with 2 point conversion. I mean, it is a totally different ball game. Bama has to run the football. You're not, surprised that they do throw the ball. So again, if you're South Florida, and I like Alex Golish, and I know you do too, but uh, not ideal, not what you want to be doing.
No, not at all. Let's head over to our underdog central. where we actually picked two winners this past week. BYU, who were 11.5 point underdogs, winning outright against SMU. California, 13.5 point underdogs, winning outright, going to Jordan Hare and getting that done. And boy, did Peyton Thorne look terrible. I still have a still was checking in my buddy who was arguing with me that Peyton Thorne was a better quarterback than Alan Bowman, and it's looking pretty good for me right now. Not that either of them were like amazing, but Peyton Thorne was especially bad. But credit California, dude. Unbelievable effort by them. Going on the road. First of many long travels that they have to do this season without a couple starters. And you go in there and we'll talk about it more, but in our actual recap, but awesome performance there. You had Eastern Michigan plus 24.5, and it looked pretty decent early. Washington did end up pulling away there. Will Rogers looked really good. I thought Cole Snyder played fine in the first half. It was what it was, right? They just overwhelmed you talent wise. Um, I mean, I'm assuming you don't really regret taking that pick.
Well, I would have wish I would have taken Northern Illinois, a different
Oh
MAC
yeah,
team,
yeah, different MAC team, yeah.
obviously. But yeah, I mean they were up 3-0 at the end of the first quarter, and you're like, what's gonna happen? And then it was 6-7, and then obviously Washington pulled away. So what can you do? But I was taking a long shot there. It was 24, 25. It
20,
was
yeah.
big number. So did what I could. They covered. So I guess we talk about good teams win, great teams cover. So maybe they're on wagon alert, but we'll see. But yeah, good for Washington though to just keep winning games, keep stacking football games, especially those winnable football games early on. Really interesting to see the Egg Bowl this week. Really interesting. Not the Egg Bowl. I'm sorry. It's
Civil War
the
or not Civil War.
wow.
Total
Oh,
brain
they
fart. But
they leave the
regardless,
pack. They leave the Pac-12 and fucking forget their conference name or their
their rivalry game.
rivalry game.
Yeah. You also had Kennesaw State plus 15.5 as an underdog to win outright. And I actually like that pick a lot from you. But like you said, Louisiana kind of looking like a decent team there. And Ben Woolridge looking good over there at
Yeah.
quarterback, the Louisiana Crease to Houston. Looks like it's not mattering too much for that offense.
Yep, Perry looked good. Elijah Davis had a couple explosive runs. I mean, that's what you want to do on the road, be able to run the football. You can run the ball at 7.4 yards per clipped for 250 plus yards. That's going to win you plenty of football games. Plenty of football games. Kennesaw State still looking for that first FBS win. Thought it might be this week. We will see. They'll have a couple of chances coming up. Obviously, in the CUSA, they will have plenty of chances to win football games. But yeah, obviously, good for Louisiana and a team that's already won and own their conference, right? Because of how they handle business. Um, I'm sorry, not 1-0 in the conference, but they're already 2-0 and just kind of moving on. They got Tulane this week, right? So we'll see how that goes. See if Tulane is still up for that game after disappointing loss for Kansas State, and then Wake Forest on the road too. Again, two winnable football games for sure for Louisiana. Again, they're going to be underdogs, but those are games they can absolutely win, and then you could start talking about them for potential, postseason recognition.
Yeah, it's look, we're between me and you, we are 2-4-8 on season, hitting 25% on these long shot underdogs. I feel like that's pretty good. I feel like if we're hitting like 1 out of 4, that's pretty exceptional. Does that feel exceptional to you?
And basically once a week. I mean, thanks to you for taking both those this week, but yeah, that's what's going to be. There's going to be ups and downs. Obviously, these are fun ones to do because you're kind of calling your shot on some big time lines, and it's more about just teams that you could potentially see struggling, and we've seen that. We've been kind of on the money where like these games are maybe a little bit closer than Vegas or most people would have thought.
Yeah, I think a 10-point spread implies, hold on, I'm doing the math right now, about like an 80%, maybe like 78% win probably. So if we're in 1 of 4, we're right in that ballpark. I think we're actually overperforming. So that's pretty solid. Speaking of overperforming, for me this week at the counter, I was 5-2. Well, I was really 5-1, but then I was like, you said Oklahoma minus 20.5, and I just liked it too much. So I went and wrote it with you. I did send out, I actually meant to put this on the show, but I actually forgot about it until I saw the ticket that I had for it. USC minus 28.5. I threw that out on Twitter, and normally I'm like, oh my gosh, I just cursed myself because my Twitter picks that go out late are just usually catastrophic failures. But yeah, I was glad to see that after a week where I went 2-5 with my bets. Going 5-2 feels pretty dang good. The only one that I missed was the only one I regret is actually I don't regret any of them. Like Oklahoma, given the information that we had about Oklahoma and Houston, I felt good about taking 20.5. Obviously, hindsight sucks. I still also feel good about that Maryland minus 8.5. The line I think moved to like 10. So I felt good about that. Texas Michigan under 43.5. That was so important that you got that number. Because the final total was 43. So for any of you people that got a 42.5, I'm sorry. All right. Very disappointing for you. Virginia +2, awesome. Texas State, I mean, UTSA is on stink alert, by the way. They're on major stink alert. South Carolina, Kentucky under 43. That was cashed. It was getting a little sweaty there at the end, but with that pick six, but we'll take it. And then USC minus 28.5, just sweat free. Went to bed before that game even finished because they were up like 48-0. So I was feeling pretty good. And Bryson Barnes and Spencer Petras weren't going to bring him back in that game. So, but you at the counter, you had a stinker a little bit. You went 0-3. Oregon minus 18.5. Oklahoma minus 28.5. And then Texas Tech +2.5. What are, if any, your regrets this week?
It's, I guess, probably Oklahoma, kind of buying in them too early. I guess not having too much data to go on without Jeff Levy. Washington State just buried Texas Tech. I did not give them enough credit. John Mateer,
Mateer.
Mateer is awesome. And he was really, really good. And just getting kind of blown out on the road there. Not a good sign for Texas Tech. It's the Apple Cup, by the way. The Apple Cup is Washington and Washington State. So that'll be really, really fun to watch this week. It just didn't work out for me this week. It didn't. But you know what? We'll be back. We'll be back. I was 2-0 week 1, 0-3. We'll be back positive. Just you wait.
Let's go. I believe. And week 1, so you're 1-3 right now, which is in a better spot than I was after week 1 where I was 2-5. So
Oh
climb's
yeah,
gonna be real.
I guess I didn't take it on the show, but as soon as Darius Taylor went out, was taken out, I pounded. You didn't see in that game. Just so I guess unofficially 2-3, officially 1-3.
Unofficially,
I'll take it.
unofficially, which is funny, but that's all right. But if you were following and tailing our spread picks these last couple of weeks, CD, you are 11-6 on the show, just picking games, and 11-6 on picking outright winners for these games. I am 12-5 in winners, 12-5 ATS. We are cooking on that. Wouldn't it be nice? Right now, I'm just a steady 7-7 on my picks at the counter, but for these picks that we're forced to pick against the spread for all these games that we preview.
Yeah.
Being 12-5 feels and 11-6 feels pretty awesome. So let's just get into that. All right, the first one, let's talk about Texas, Michigan. Holy Texas. They might be really good at football. So we both took them to cover, winning cover. So that one was pretty much not a sweat from the beginning. I mean, they kind of from front to back just did their damage, and Quinn Ewers looked awesome, and Michigan looked terrible.
Yeah, I mean we've seen this before, right? Texas going on the road in week 2 and dominating, a pretty darn good team, which we thought. Obviously, Michigan, I think you have to readjust them just a little bit with how they are offensively, and Davis Warren, and I guess the lack there of Alex Orji, and you can only do so much. I think that can win you plenty of games in the Big Ten. I do. I think with your defensive line, I think you can beat your Minnesotas and your Illinois, Michigan States, Indiana's, teams like that, right? But I do think to beat all of a sudden now USC, Oregon, Ohio State, I think you're going to need a little bit more than just those. And I don't think I don't know what's going on there. Is it just the talent's not, is Orji is not performing Davis Warren, they just feel like he's the best chance to win because it feels like almost Cade McNamara-esque, where it's like a guy that's hopefully not going to turn the ball over, although he had 2 interceptions. A guy that maybe doesn't scare you pushing the ball down the field, but can manage the game. You can have a really good defense and running game. The problem was they just didn't get the running game going much at all.
No, they didn't even
Under
like
100
try.
yards. I mean, yeah, when you get jumped on, I guess when you get jumped on in the first half like that, like the game, it's over. Like Michigan doesn't really have a chance, I think, to come back and win the football game. But again, hats off to Texas and what they did. They came out ready to go, and they didn't even run the ball great, which I guess no surprise because that D line for Michigan, that front seven is really, really good. But Quinn Ewers was unbelievable, right? Very impressed with Gunnar Helm, the tight end there. Obviously, Golden and Bond had theirs, and Blue was nice out of the backfield, but it was just big time throw at the big time throw for Quinn Ewers. I think he made himself a lot of money today. Not that he needed it, because he was already, first round guy, I think, in my opinion. But yeah, he looked really good. And the takeaway, in macro is Texas is going to be a team. And I think that's no surprise to anybody, but all of a sudden you've got that Georgia matchup circled, and it's like, holy cow. Is there any separation between these two teams? Is Texas the team that's going to be able to beat Georgia because of that O line, because of Quinn Ewers, because of Sark, right? And the way their defense looked in this game, it's going to be awesome. Now, obviously, Texas has to get there. You still got to beat a couple out of conference games, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, obviously rivalry game there. But this schedule, man, the way it's looking, it to me, 11-1 feels really, really good for Texas and a potential SEC championship game berth. But if not, a playoff talk, you got to feel really good. You got to feel really good.
Yeah, you have to. Now, against some teams, they it might benefit them to try to run the ball. Like they're up in some games and they're not able to run the ball and put some things away. That can get scary. But I thought their defense played really well. Again, we don't really know how good it doesn't look like it's a very good offense for Michigan, but do we know how good Michigan's offense is, or do we know how good Texas's defense is? I don't think my questions about either of them have been completely answered. I'm fairly certain that Michigan's offense kind of stinks, and that's why I don't think I know how good Texas's defense is. So moving forward, something that I'm going to be definitely monitoring is what that defense is able to do, especially like that front seven, because it felt like they kind of stopped the run game, but at the same time, Donovan Edwards was averaging like 5 yards a carry. Khalil Mullings, they came out and ran the ball like three straight times with Khalil Mullings and got a first down, and then I don't know, or in the second half, and then I don't know what happened, and they just kind of went away from him. Yeah, just kind of a stinker for Michigan. It'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. Doesn't feel like a year where they're going to win the Big Ten, but they could still be a problem for a lot of teams, especially in like that middle to lower tier teams in the Big Ten. But feels like Ohio State might be licking their chops this year. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting moving forward with both of these teams. Yeah, but yeah, I think there's some serious problems with with Michigan, but
Yeah.
the
Well,
undercashed.
it did. It did. They got dropped down all the way to 17. They dropped 7 points. The second biggest faller, as the first biggest was obviously Notre Dame, down 13 spots to 18, one spot below them. Texas gets moved up to number 2 in the AP poll ahead of Ohio State after their win over Michigan, which is, I think, totally fair, even though Ohio State's looked very, very good. Didn't cover in week 1, which is fine because at Akron. But regardless, so I was really impressed with how Texas. So obviously that you drive down and you look good in the first drive and you miss a field goal, whatever, right? And then boom, 3 and out, go down, score a touchdown. And then Michigan responds with a field goal, boom, touchdown. And then you get an interception. Then you kick a field goal. And then the fumble. Michigan's driving down to try to make it, one score game, being down 14 going into half. And then they fumble, boom, quick touchdown drive. I mean, really impressive. Like this, I know we learned this last year, but these are not your Texas teams of the last decade and a half. Like this is a different, culture. I think different mentality. Obviously, the talent is there in the trenches as well to back it up. Wow. I mean, Sark and those, they're really, really humming there, and pretty exciting to see, Texas to be able to do that. Obviously, in week one on the road, the big house was rowdy and it was exciting, and they just took care of business early and they just shut them up. And there's nothing Michigan could do in the second half to change the outcome after what they did in the first half.
Let's talk about Cyhawk. I mean, what a game that game came down to. What a kick from that kicker. Uh, I had Iowa to win and to cover. Of course, they would not have covered whether or not that kick was made, but here you are, picking Iowa State. I mean, what did you see that you liked from Iowa State down the stretch there?
I was really impressed. Obviously, we know those receivers are really good. I talked about Higgins and his big body being able to make plays, and you saw that. Obviously, Noel had the long touchdown on a really nice route develop concept, and Beck hit him in stride. He did not have a ton of time early in the first half. They didn't really run the ball well in the first half, and didn't really run the ball well in the second half either, but they did enough to get some things going. And all of a sudden, you saw a much different team in that second half. 20-6 run, right? Over those final two quarters was really, really nice. And Iowa, again, a team that you do worry about closing out teams just because obviously not about their defense. I feel really good about their defense still, right? Iowa State's got a good offense. They really do. And Iowa, I thought played really well, very physical, very fast and disruptive early on. But just McNamara is not very good. And I don't know if it's him. Well, I do know it's him, but I know around them, I still don't feel very good. I mean, what ridiculous. I mean, Caleb Johnson was the only kind of production all day, and he had the long runs, and then they shut him down in the second half. And then it was just kind of Iowa State being able to just get the ball back enough times to score. And I don't know how I thought they were going to lose there at the end. And Iowa State obviously heck of a drive. I mean, how often do you see that in 28 seconds to go down
Yeah,
40 yards in Kinnick, right? That really, really impressive. Really impressed by Iowa State. Matt Campbell, obviously looking forward. This is not a conference game, so it doesn't really affect either team's conference race. But for Iowa and their schedule, you would have loved that one because I think there's a lot of winnable football games and a lot of concerning parts that you saw where you've got teams with talented quarterbacks like Michigan State, maybe Washington, right? Dare I say Nebraska, right? Like you've got some teams there that I think can give you problems through the air that I thought Iowa State kind of exposed in that second half. And then for Iowa State, I mean, you look at their schedule and you see a bunch of wins or games that you feel good that they should win until November. And once you get to November, anything can happen. Obviously, long season before that, but good for Matt Campbell. And this was a series that Iowa has dominated last decade, right? Decade plus, right? And Iowa State gets a win here. Two straight trips to Kinnick the past 3 years and two straight victories for Iowa State. Super, super impressed by that and what they did. This was a fantastic game. Say what you want about, the flash and Iowa's offense and everything else, but the atmosphere was great. It was on CBS, which was hilarious to watch those guys have to call Iowa's game and all that stuff after seeing them, used to with Alabama and the SEC, Jaden Daniels last year and all that stuff. The total contrast there. It was awesome. And obviously a lot of change with the TV networks and everything going on with college football, but still worked out great. The product was still incredible. And obviously, big time win for Iowa State.
yeah, it was. I mean, look, Iowa. This wasn't a game that I was counting on them winning necessarily when I took their over 8.5 wins at plus 160, but certainly would have helped. Certainly would have helped. I don't feel that much different about Iowa. I mean, I think obviously they
It's,
struggled through the air. Like I still don't feel that different. Like they still struggled through the air offensively. Maybe the Illinois State game. Uh, you just there's still issues there with Cade McNamara. Like I'm still wondering if we're gonna see Brendan Sullivan sooner than later. To maybe add a different element of athleticism at the quarterback position. Uh, yeah, it wasn't looking great. Although Caleb Johnson looked awesome last week, it was Molden. When's it going to be LaShawn Williams? It feels like they got a nice kind of three-headed monster back there to spell, because Lord knows they're going to need to run the ball to win games as long as Cade McNamara is their quarterback there. Uh, yeah, Vanderzee didn't really do anything. Thought that he might be an impact player this week. Uh, Luke Lackey, 0 catches. So yeah, I still don't like feel that different. I don't feel that much different about this Iowa football team after the game, although it was interesting to see Iowa State have success through the air. So it's something I'll be monitoring. That is something I'll be monitoring. Then let's head over now to Charlotte, where Tennessee clobbered NC State. We talked about Georgia and Texas being kind of that tier one in SEC. I'm pretty dang close to being able to put Tennessee in that tier one as well. I mean, they looked really good, and we both took Tennessee to win and cover in this game because I think we both maybe you're not as high on this NC State football team as some other people were heading into the season. Yeah, Nico looked fantastic. Dylan Sampson looked awesome. The defense was flying and buzzing, and Grayson McCall looked terrible, and so did that NC State defense. So definite issues moving forward for NC State. Not sure what it's going to look like down the stretch for them. Tennessee could also just be really stinking good, and NC State could find some success in these games later down the stretch. But boy, does Nico look like he looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC right now.
And I still think there's a ceiling to get to, not
Yeah.
only for Nico, but for this team in general. I mean, that's the encouraging spot is they put up a 50 burger on NC State. They won by 40 plus, and you still think there's untapped potential. And that's what's so exciting because you get next week to get right against Kent State, team that just lost to what St. Francis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus. What are we doing, Kenny Burns? What are we doing?
What are
You're
we
going to be
doing, Kenny Burns?
47.5 point favorites. That might be one I might get on before that crosses 49. Regardless, though, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, like with the way those teams have looked, especially defensively for Arkansas, I mean, geez, man, what Nico can do and those guys and those receivers. I mean, Squirrel Wright made some nice plays. Brazil had a couple nice catches. Dylan Sampson on the backfield was super nice. I mean, you didn't even get to guys like Broom McCoy and Holden Stays, guys I really like, big bodied physical mismatches. You just ran the ball really well. And Samson, we know he's a stud. 6.6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 132 yards. He's really good. Nico had another 65 more on the ground. Yeah, they just dominated NC State up front there defensively, which I will say I am concerned. I still have not yet to be answered about their secondary because I don't think Grace McCall had the talent or the time to be able to take advantage of that. But when you get into these elite games, where if you look at the taste schedule, you've got Georgia, maybe Alabama figures it out, Florida and DJ Lagway, who knows there, but that could be what your potential downfall in terms of limitations. Why I'm not putting them quite there in your tier one category in the SEC. But if you look at the AP poll and you've got Missouri right there and Ole Miss and Alabama, quite frankly, I mean, I feel really good about Tennessee with the rest of those teams there, honestly. And I was wrong. I was a guy that I picked their under, and I was a little bit concerned defensively what was going to happen, and they're really good. But for NC State, it, if you told me last week they were going to lose 51-10, I'd have been like, damn, man, that sucks because their schedule, you feel like they've got a ton of winnable football games there, and it would suck for them to drain away this opportunity. But again, first of all, not an ACC loss, which is good. And I think Tennessee just is really good. Right? You could still be a top 20, 25 team like NC State could be and still lose by 40 to a top 5 team potentially when they play their peak. And obviously they didn't play their peak, but they played really well. And you kind of got a quick turnaround. Obviously, Clemson in a couple weeks, Northern Illinois finds their way on the schedule, which is awesome. Obviously, Syracuse and Cal, two teams that looked very good. Duke got a win in Northwestern. So NC State's going to have to be better offensively. And this is 2 straight years of Robert and I and just seeing incompetency running the ball, right? Running the ball and throwing the football as well. It's a shame. It is a shame because it was tough. I mean, how Jordan Waters had -4 yards. -4 yards. He averaged -0.6 yards per carry. That is
Yeah.
atrocious. Atrocious.
Yeah. So I have Tennessee ranked as a top 5 team on my own personal top 25 poll. I'm ranked as a top five team. Is that crazy?
No, I mean they've been as impressive as anybody. As impressive as anybody. There's no shame in that. Obviously, it'll all sort itself out, anyways. Especially in the SEC, you're gonna have what is that? If you're looking at you're looking at six of the top seven teams in the SEC, and by the way, eight of the top nine teams coming from both the Big Ten and the SEC. So again, wow, those conferences at the top end, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot, just sort out there for those teams. And yeah, Tennessee, man, you got to be impressed. I will say, does NC State like can they turn around? Like, can they turn around this year?
Oh, absolutely. I think with that schedule, you can absolutely turn it around. Like we're saying, I hate to sound like broken record, but Tennessee's team is really good. All right, that's just what they are. NC State can take it to UNC. NC State can compete with pretty much anyone I think in the ACC talent wise, except for Clemson and Miami, right? And again, very concerned about their defense. A little bit of concern about what I saw from Grayson McCall, though I'm not hitting the panic button. I don't think he was awesome week one either when they played against a not Division One football team. So very interested to see what that team's going to look like moving forward. Yeah, just not a top 30 team for me, and at least in my rankings. But who
I, I
knows?
w-
Who knows?
yeah, I would say this game. I think if they played again, I don't think it's 41 points because you look at that first drive for NC State. They ran 12 plays. They bled 7 minutes off the clock, and they went 29 yards. Obviously, you get into almost field goal range, and then you just go backwards a ton of yards. So obviously, that's not ideal at the punt. And then you were driving. It was 10-3. You were driving, and you throw that pick six. Will Brooks makes a nice play on the ball, and yeah, it kind of gets there. Tennessee scores, and then they get a field goal at the end of the half. So like, and then they went out, and then you had your this is your drive recap for NC State in the second half. Fumble, turnover on downs, fumble, pick six, turnover on downs. Like you're not going to get back into a football game. Like that's why the implosion happened. Credit to NC State for not just kind of punting on the game for so called and just trying to force the issue and make plays and crawl back into the game. And that's why it got so out of hand. But not to take anything away from Tennessee, but I do think Friends State. Let's not overreact. Obviously, there's concerning issues, but like Matt said, not sound like a broken record. It's still early. They can still be fine in the ACC.
Colorado versus Nebraska was a bloodbath. I know, what was it, like 28-10, 28-7, something like that. Yeah, Nebraska's D line. And look, I was wrong, but I thought that this might be a spot where Colorado kind of taxed Nebraska a little bit through the air, but you saw Nebraska's athletically profiled DBs, the ones that they've been recruiting over there and gathering with Tony White, and paid off really well. And look, that D line we talked about in the season. We had a video where we are talking about the best units in college football, and we talked about Nebraska's D line. People might think that we're crazy, but that Nebraska D line, granted, talking about Colorado's offensive line, okay, but that defensive line for Nebraska looked the part. It looked like the unit that we were hyping up back in June.
Here's the thing. I'm with you. They looked unbelievable, but I also think this is on Colorado and whatever kind of offensive scheme that they came out with, we're not trying to commit to running the football, right? I mean, Nebraska runs, I think it's like a 3-3-5. There is, you can run the ball on that. I know their nose is really, really good, and that's key to have in a 3-3-5. Obviously, the polar bear, Nash was everywhere. And so are a lot of other players on that D line. But again, like, yes, you went down early, but you still don't have to abandon the run. Like, it was just super frustrating to see Dallin Hayden and August offered it, like guys not getting the ball because I I think that this game could have been closer, especially it got out of hand there in that first half. Obviously, Colorado had the pick go through their hands and Nebraska ended up scoring, but credit to Nebraska and Matt Rule, signature win, sold out crowd, momentum obviously soaring their way. Colorado again, two straight weeks of not looking great. They didn't look great in North Dakota State. Got to win there. Did not look good at all. Kind of came out flat. Obviously, the pick six really didn't help, but you were backed up in your own end zone. That's also like your inability or refusal to run the football. And I don't think it's an inability. I do think they have the offensive line and the talent there to be able to run the ball, especially with those receivers, because you still have to respect those receivers. And you kind of saw Nebraska playing a lot of, deep coverage and willing to let Colorado just nickel and dime the way down the field. But that opens up running lanes. Like there should be running lanes there, and down to hit an average 6 yards per carry. I know it was only 5 attempts, but that's the problem right there. But
Yeah,
Travis Hunter's really good. And Raiola was fun. He was accurate. He missed some throws, but he put some really, really good balls there. Dante Dawa. I was talking about Nebraska early in the season, preseason, or preview. I was like, who's their number one running back? Do they have an alpha there? And Dante Dawa is really good. He has emerged as that guy that they feel good giving the ball, 15, 20 times a game and kind of running him out. And yeah, and they could do it. And obviously the second half they took their foot off the gas and just kind of rode out the win. But Nebraska's a player, man. Nebraska's a player.
yeah. Uh, feel like the formula for Colorado to win against those type of teams, they have not found it at all, right? They're going to be able to compete against, I think, a lot of teams, and they're going to be able to score against a lot of teams. But when you go up against a physically dominating defensive line, such as Nebraska's, they're going to have problems because they have not figured it out yet at all. They refuse to run the ball, like you said. Shador's just back there, just helpless. They tried to get side to side with it, throwing screen plays, quick slants, and I credit what they were doing in the pass game to try to avoid, some of the damage that the defensive line was doing. But yeah, it wasn't enough. It was not enough. And yeah, that's really all I got to say about that game. I know Shearer went to the locker room with 2 minutes to go in the game. Uh, I don't know if that was because of an injury or because that was for some other reason. That is a little bit concerning as well. But I'm just I I don't feel I feel slightly worse about Colorado. This team, I think we were both on the under 5.5 wins for them, but I think I just feel a lot better about Nebraska more than I feel worse about Colorado. I think Colorado is what they are, right? And they just got exposed today by a team that was more physical than them. So that just is exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. We want to talk about good games for second half games. I mean, Mississippi State, Arizona State. Arizona State got out early, right? And then they kind of just took their foot off the gas a little bit, but then Mississippi State just did not let go. And they came back in this game. What were they down 30-6? Something to that degree, 30-13, or I
It's,
don't know what that number was.
yeah, it was third 30-3. Yep.
30-3, dude. And they came back and almost made it a ball game. Now, we both picked Arizona State to win and cover. That was awesome. Cam Scatterby. Holy schmoly, is that guy good at football? All right. And also, holy moly, is Mississippi State's run defense very concerning heading into SEC play.
That's
I mean,
that's not something you want to be concerned with. That is not something you want to be concerned with. And obviously, credit to Arizona State, but Cam Scatterbo, man, good football player. We talked about like letting Sam leave it, get comfortable in a game, and you give Scatterbo 33 rushing attempts. He averages 8 yards on those carries, and he goes for 262 yards. That is how you get your quarterback comfortable. And Sam Leavitt also
didn't
had
need to do
68
anything.
more and 2 touchdowns on the ground, but that was a nice compliment. Obviously, he had 69 yards. It was 10 for 20. But a lot of that too was like game script dictated that you didn't have to throw the ball and you didn't want to throw the ball. Obviously, you only scored 3 points in the second half, which is where you would kind of want a quarterback to be able to go in there and extend drives and really bleed out a clock and put a team away. But a win's a win for Kenny Dillingham, man. A win is a win. And for Jeff Lebby, it's a tough loss. It is. But again, you were on the road and you made it close. And Shapen looked pretty good at times, especially in that second half. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And you, I would have liked to see Booth and Lee run the ball better. We talked about Shapen being their leading rusher last week, and that was a little bit concerning. And obviously, the game script dictated that you had to throw the ball in the second half. But to me, that's for Mississippi State. That's where I wanted to see them be able to run the ball better than they did. And they didn't run the ball well in the first half. And they got down big early. But Cam Scatterbo, man. Scatterboo. Scatterboo.
Boo. Yeah, credit Blake Shapen, by the way. That fumble was bad. All right. The one that they lost in Arizona State, the big boy touchdown, but credit him coming back in that game. Kelly Akari, I thought was going to be a better weapon for them, and I'm not saying that he can't be, but Kevin Coleman feels like to have emerged as this wide receiver one. I also think that Mosley as well has kind of emerged as another nice target for them to have. But if they get Kelly Akari going as well with those guys, I think offensively, and I like Trayer at tight end as well. I like Trayer at tight end. So if you can get as the third option at receiver going and start to figure out how to run the ball, then maybe this Jeff Levy team can do something in the SEC play. But right now, I'm looking at this Mississippi State team, and I'm very concerned, very, very concerned on both sides of the football because if you're giving up, you know, dang near 350 yards more than that on the ground, a team like Arizona State, I'm very concerned. What a team like Texas A&M is going to do to you, what a team like Texas is going to do to you, Georgia, Arkansas. What is Arkansas going to do to you, by the way? Quinn Jackson looks freaking awesome over there for Arkansas. We'll talk about them soon. Tennessee, Missouri, Ole Miss. This schedule for Mississippi State is absolutely brutal. And there's no guarantees that they beat Toledo either next week. So that's a game that's going to be on my radar as possible stinker situation alert. But yeah,
Well,
I'm hoping the bottom doesn't fall for this Mississippi State team, but it's starting to look like that they might not. And I know that Jeff Levy tried to put together as much as he could on that roster after it was kind of devastated from last year, but it might not be enough.
you cannot get outrushed by more than 300 yards on the road and expect to win. It was a miracle you were in that game in the first place. Considering that disparity there, obviously your points are all valid. Your points are all valid there in terms of looking forward for Mississippi State. In terms of looking forward for Arizona State, right? Do not sleep. Do not sleep next Friday on the road, right? At Texas State, at San Marcos, right?
Oh yeah.
That they're going to be ready to go. I think that fan base wants that win, and obviously Texas Tech, did not look good at all last week. So in an ideal world, you can beat Texas Tech, you can beat Texas State, and then all of a sudden you're 4-0. Damn it! And who knows? Once you get into Big 12 play, you can feel really good about that. I looked at their schedule early, and part of the reason why I was on the under was just because like they're out of conference. It just scared me, and not that like any of these teams are like really, really good teams and just going to automatically lose. But like Wyoming was a team that was like you could have lost to. That spread was not that big, and obviously their offense was just pretty terrible, and they lost again to Idaho this week. But Mississippi State again, a team that you should have beaten. You were over a touchdown favorite, or you were about a less than touchdown favorite, and you did win. Awesome. Texas State again, another team that kind of scary and frisky. Get away with a win there. And I think you feel really good about not only making steps to be playing winning football, but in terms of being able to make a bowl game this year for Arizona State. You feel really good because their schedule in terms of Big 12 standards is not that great. Like I don't see Houston, right? I don't see Colorado, right? You know, some of the teams that you kind of want to see towards the bottom half of Big 12, you don't really get on your schedule, and a lot of your tough games are on the road. So again, but big time win. You did your job in week 2. I love the uniforms. The gold out just looked very, very good with the white helmet. But Scadaboo did this thing. We'll see how they continue to leave it, comfortable and going because they're going to need him to throw more than 60 yards to win football games. And we'll see how they kind of progress that. But I also trust Kenny Dillingham to be able to do that because if there's a guy in the Big 12 I trust with quarterbacks, it's probably Dillingham.
Arkansas blew their game against Oklahoma State. And credit for you. You were all over this. I believe you had Arkansas to cover as well as actually
Oklahoma,
I guess Oklahoma State covered
they
because
didn't even come. That was
we picked it
ridiculous,
at seven and
man.
a half and they went to OT. So
And they won by 8.
but
That was
in regulation,
ridiculous.
Arkansas covered. So I guess I'll give you half credit for that. But yeah, Oklahoma State, I guess finding a way to win that football game on the back of none other than Alan Bowman. And some explosive plays by Rashad Owens, Brent Presley, yada yada yada. But yeah, and the fullback, whatever that play was when they tied it up at 21 and then came out and
Schultz.
yeah, that was crazy. So Arkansas felt like they blew that game. The clock management, the fact that they were able to get that field off was a miracle. Field goal off at the end of regulation was a miracle. Uh, I don't know. I'm I feel better about Arkansas after this game because I think their offense was really good. But I'm of the opinion, and I think Oklahoma State they're their top 25 team. I don't think Oklahoma State's that good, and I also don't think Arkansas's that good. So I'm these are two teams that are still in monitoring to actually figure out how good they really are. Because I think that while Arkansas I don't think is that good, I also don't think, but I feel better about Arkansas now after watching their first two games. I feel better about their offense. I feel better about Taylor Green. Jaquin Jackson when healthy, and we haven't seen that a lot the last 2 years. Jaquin Jackson is really good at football.
Yeah.
So, and Andrew Armstrong was healthy, which I wasn't sure if he was going to play.
Yep. It was
Might have
big.
had an impact on my decision. I didn't think he was going to play, but he ended up having a huge impact. Luke Haas had a big touchdown as well. It's good to see him healthy. So when this team is healthy, I think this offense is pretty effective. And credit them for loading the box and stopping Ollie Gordon as well. And look, when Oklahoma State, when teams load the box and they're not able to run the ball with Ollie Gordon, they're going to have to rely on Alan Bowman to throw the ball through the air. And we'll see how good he is down the road because there might be some games where he's just not enough, right? Against certain teams, he just might not be enough. But in this game, he was. And I thought he played pretty decent down the stretch. And those wide receivers were explosive. The play calling was all right. But I am concerned about both of these teams' defenses. And I guess just moving forward, I think I was on the under for both of these teams at the beginning of the season, I believe. And it wasn't a bettable win total for me, but someone had to win this game, right? Oklahoma State ended up winning and somehow covering in overtime the 7.5.
Dude, you look at the team stats here and Arkansas, if you were to tell me, man, they were going to go on the road, have 648 yards. They were 11 for 19 on third down while holding Oklahoma State to under 33%. You had 400 yards passing with Taylor Green. You had 230 yards rushing on the ground, and you held the ball for 36 minutes, man. That is a recipe for a win, and you didn't, man. And listen, I like Sam Pittman. I do. He's a great guy. He seems like he's a pretty good coach to play for, but that might have just been, his final straw there in terms of like his job security, because this is a game like, yes, you were, over a touchdown dog. You were 7.5 point dog on the road, but it kind of felt like you had to win that game, especially with your schedule and what's going on. Now, the good news is you look at your first couple weeks here in the SEC and you see a couple winnable teams. You see Auburn, who struggled. You see A&M, who struggled in week 1. After that, though, right, you get to October and there is, 2 winnable football games and everyone else is really, really good. Now, maybe LSU, we'll see what happens there, but they kind of figured it out there in that fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, everything you said with Oklahoma State, their defense, but Alan Bowman played well. We'll see. The encouraging thing is it's kind of been 2 weeks for Oklahoma State now, and you played, I think, not 2 great teams at all, but 2 respectable teams, and Alan Bowman's looked good. Now you're just waiting though, because there's gonna be a time where he has a stinker game, and that's where you need Ollie Gordon to come in and dominate, not like he did today, but like he did a week ago. So we'll see. Their schedule looking ahead, a lot of winnable football games for sure. Obviously, Tulsa next week to get right, but then it's Utah who looks really good when Cam Rising was healthy, and Kansas State again. There's some vulnerabilities there defensively for them. And then obviously getting into Big 12, they were a team. I will say, I feel after this game, even though Oklahoma State won and covered, I feel better about Arkansas and I feel worse about Arkansas State. I think similar to you in terms of what happened there and maybe some potential vulnerabilities looking forward for these teams.
Well, let's move on then. Let's talk about Kansas and Illinois. I picked Illinois to win and cover this game. You picked Kansas to win and cover this game. I felt good about Illinois' defense and what Aaron Henry did in the offseason. I think they had the personnel that they didn't have last year. And boy, did Illinois look really good on Saturday. They look really good.
Altmaier, when he's play action, he throws a really good football. He does. And even though they lost their tight end for the year, Zachary Franklin is incredible. That guy, I was a little bit nervous to see because he didn't play well or healthy last year, but he looked like himself back at the UTSA days. Pat Bryant had a nice catch. Caden Fegan ran the ball well at times. Obviously, he didn't know eye-popping stats, but they did enough. They did enough.
Defense.
Obviously, yeah, it was that defense. But here's the thing: it's like not to put it on Lance Leipold because I trust Lance Leipold a lot more than a lot of other coaches. But Andy Kotelnicki, man, I think they ran the ball so well and so explosively last game. And you're seeing Penn State have explosive plays. Like, where was the explosion in this game for Kansas? Because Jalen Daniels struggled to move down the football field consistently. 3 interceptions. Devin Neal ran the ball well. Highshot ran the ball well. Both guys over 5 yards per carry. Devin Neal was 14 for 101. That's plenty good. And my question is why is that only 14? Why is that number only 14? Obviously, you want to have balance, but I was a little bit like, well, I just thought I was waiting for Kansas to just pop one off and kind of pull away. And credit to Illinois for keeping it that game, keeping it close, and then having a really good fourth quarter. Like you said, that defense played really, really well. And Illinois is a team under Brett Bielema, man, they're going to be frisky this year. If Altmaier continues to play well, that defense continues to take strides like it did today with the Scott brothers, with Briggs, and what
David Scott
Yakis
was
can
good.
do. Yeah, Scott was great, and what Yakis can do, rushing the passer as well. Yeah, I mean, I was wrong. I was wrong, and I was high on both these teams. I took both these teams overs, and I thought Kansas would win this one, and Illinois did. And I still think Kansas can win the Big 12 because I've got a future on that, and I still feel fine about that. Obviously, it would be nice to get a win, but Illinois, man, what can I say? Not enough credit can be given there. And obviously, I know as fans were very excited. That game was sold out. It's a great atmosphere. Illinois looking to build momentum, and they did. And they did before they got, Nebraska and Penn State, a couple of really tough games as well on their schedule. But if you can make it to November, just make it to November, and I think you can have a really good chance to be bowling at the end of the year.
Yeah. I wonder, because Lance Leipold also said he's like, we're not changing the offense. It's just going to be a different guy calling plays, right? And that's Jeff Grimes, who I respect for the most part as an offensive coordinator. How healthy is Jalen Daniels? Because we talked about how they didn't use him a lot in the run game week one. And, while Kansas looked good, at least in the second half, threw 3 picks. Like Jalen Daniels did not look like the Jalen Daniels that we're used to as well. So how much of this is Jalen Daniels and how much of this, and I know the rushing attack, the explosiveness in the rushing attack was lacking a little bit, although Devin Neal did have 100 yards and 14 carries. But I look and I'm wondering if we're gonna see this Jalen Daniels all year, or if we're gonna see the old Jalen Daniels all year.
Here's what I'll say to that is they ran him early on a one designed run, and I just might like I was like, oh, be okay. And he kind of like got up a little bit slow, but he was fine. And I think I attribute his struggles throwing the ball more to rust than anything. This is a guy that did not play a lot last year. he has not practiced a lot because of his back injury and because I want to keep him healthy. To me, that's what I guess I should have accounted for that and should have been more aware that his rust in terms of reps, live reps, getting there. I mean, yes, he's played a lot of football over his career, but he's also been hurt a lot. And it's been a while since he's getting back into the groove. And I think you saw some rust there, some bad decisions, some missed throws. They had a couple, penalties, overturned some touchdowns, but yeah, I think more credit I think has to be just given to Illinois and what they did disruptively. It looked like 2022 again, and I think if you're Illinois fans, that is really encouraging. And you didn't even run the ball great. You didn't even run the ball great, and that's what's exciting. Is that Altmaier did enough? Your defense flew around, the crowd was behind you, and you got to win.
Cal goes on the road and beats Auburn. And you know what? I'll say it. They controlled the game, the entire
Entire
game,
game. Yeah,
the entire game. I had no faith that Auburn was going to come back and win that football game. You texted me in the middle of it. Here it is. You said Teddy Buchanan is awesome, and I'm like, you're right. You know who else is awesome? Ryan McCullough, Marcus Harris, Miles Williams. I thought they played a fantastic front to back defensive game of football and put Hugh Freeze in an absolute blender. They pounded Auburn. All right. Auburn looked terrible. Peyton Thorne was awful. Cam Coleman looked okay. All right, but look,
he got banged up a little bit too.
got banged up a little bit. Just I'm concerned about this Auburn team moving forward. But more than that, and you were on them first, this California team might not. It might be a team that threatens some teams in the ACC. And
Listen,
when I evaluate uh, the rest of their schedule, I'm looking at games like Miami that you get at home, where Miami has to travel across the country, by the way, to play you, right? I'm looking at Florida State, all of a sudden looks like a very winnable game. NC State, you get at home, looks like a really winnable game. Stanford, Syracuse, SMU, Oregon State, Wake Forest, Pitt. There are so many winnable games on the schedule for Cal. And guess what? If Mendoza goes down, we don't care because Chandler Rogers is there as well. Like the ceiling, I think, of this Cal team, okay, just shot way up. And we saw when they play good defense, right? And we've seen them score on offense before, right? You do lose Jake Spavital, or you don't have Jake Spavital, obviously, anymore. Was he the offensive coordinator there last year? I might be just spitting rando stuff, but let me just pull this up real quick. Yeah, he was their OC last year, and he was really good. Now he's the OC at Baylor. I'm maybe not sold on what they can do offensively yet with Fernando Mendoza, but I thought they did enough. You know,
dude, Ott had 10 rushes for 11 yards.
and they dominated the game.
They did. They really did. Javian Thomas looked really good. Mendoza was throwing to a bunch of backup receivers. And they played out of their mind. Hunter, Brady, Starla. I mean, we're talking about, guys that are, your third, fourth, fifth receivers. And this is also, or I guess target weapons, targets, but this is also a team with we talked about, like they lost a lot in that secondary last year. They did. And you kind of saw those guys kind of get picked after. But the real concerning issue for Auburn is, I mean, we talked about this in the preview. It was like, can Cal stop the run? And they did enough. They did enough to make Auburn throw. I mean, Hunter averaged almost 6 yards a carry, but they did enough to where when Peyton Thorne had to drop back, bad things happened for Auburn. 4 interceptions. Well, I'm counting like 3 sacks, a lot more missed, wrecking havoc there. And I think you recovered a fumble too, but I think that was Hunter that they. Oh yeah, they knocked out the Hunter. But regardless, though, it was awesome. Justin Wilcox special, and we've talked about Cal, maybe struggling defensively more than they should have under Wilcox because he's a defensive guy and he looked good, man. He was so happy on the side you could see. And they went into Auburn and they won, man. And Mendoza and the announcers were loving Mendoza, rightfully so. He threw some beautiful balls. He was in complete command, scrambling on the run. He was throwing darts to guys, and they were making plays. And Buchanan, man, I can't say no. We talked about that. He was
Buchanan was
everywhere. Him and Olave,
unreal. Noah Williams as well.
they kind of took over there, and it was awesome. And you mentioned that schedule for Cal. I'll switch it to Auburn here in terms of, you know, Arkansas all of a sudden. Listen, I mean, they're going to be desperate, I think, back against the wall. Who knows what can happen there? And then your stretch there in October is not easy at all. I know Oklahoma didn't look good today, but they're still a talented football team. I know Kentucky didn't look good yesterday. They're a talented football team. Obviously, Georgia and Missouri on the road are not ideal. And so this is an Auburn team that wanted to win 8 football games, and this was one of them that they wanted to win. And it just didn't happen. I feel really good about my Cal, over 6.5. Could have gotten at 6. Still feel good about 6.5. And especially with this win, the way they're playing. Now, obviously, we've seen this before when their teams struggled down the stretch to cover. Auburn did that last year where they should have, hit their over for me last year, but then regardless, though, you gotta love it. I think if they didn't have to travel across country, man, and they did, by the way, and they looked good, but we'll see how that attrition gets to them because I, I we just don't know. I don't know how you quantify it. I really don't, and nobody does. Nobody knows how to do it. So we'll see. But again, you still have to feel really good for Cal, and this is a Cal football team that's it's been dying. And you mentioned Chandler Rogers too. He came back and looked good on the ground there too. And obviously, they feel really good about both those guys. I tweeted out Cal's got 2 quarterbacks better than Auburn's, and Chandler Rogers was a guy I was like, why wasn't Auburn after? Because he can run the ball like Peyton Thorne can, but he's a better thrower of the football, I think. There's a lot of other quarterbacks you're seeing out there, but is it on Thorne or is it on the offensive line that's still gelling together? Is it on Hugh Freeze? Is it the receivers aren't as good as we thought they were? A lot of things can be wrong, but again, man, it's not Peyton Thorne. He's not the guy. We know he's not the guy.
I'm gonna say this so I can clip this later, but looking at the schedule and the remaining, this is week 2. Now, this is I'm not trying to overreact here, but just looking at the schedule, like there is a world where this Cal team can make the college football playoffs, which is hilarious. It really is. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But because of the way the 12 team is structured and like that Miami team, if you somehow get them to travel across the country and I don't expect them to win that football game. I don't. You find a way to win that football game. It is going to get crazy over there in California.
Okay, last thing on Auburn. Is it crazy to say that like in every SEC game they're going to have, and maybe even that New Mexico game, by the way, they're going to have the worst quarterback in that matchup. I mean, we're talking about, Devin Dampier, New Mexico, who's frisky, right? But more seriously, Taylor Green at Arkansas. We're talking about Brock Vandegrift at Kentucky, who didn't look good, but I know that. Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. I mean, how many of those guys are better than Peyton Thorne? I think at
General
least a
Booty.
couple, if not all of them. General Booty, who's balling out right now for ULM. But I mean, I know that was a huge topic,
Well, TBD on Brock Vandegrift.
but again, I think we've seen enough of Peyton Thorne to be like, okay, he is who he is, right? He's terrible. Brock Vandegrift, I think that D lines, and we'll talk about it, but that D line of South Carolina was crazy, regardless.
South Carolina and Kentucky. I took South Carolina spread. I also took South Carolina to win over 5.5 games this season. Are people starting to believe? Remember we were talking about, and I went on Drew Tamu's call-in show, and the question of the day was, how many defenses is Texas A&M going to see that are better than Notre Dame's all year, right? And I was looking at the schedule, and I'm like, I mean, the only two that I see that could be close, right, are probably Texas and South Carolina. And I think people thought I was crazy for thinking that the South Carolina defense is really stinking good. Do you believe me now? No, we haven't seen this Kentucky offense also might be really bad. Okay. We don't know for certain. But boy, do I feel really good about South Carolina's defense. I don't feel better about necessarily the Lenore Sellers. Now I do feel better in the sense where I think
Yeah,
Kentucky's defense is good too. I thought
I
Lenore
thought
Sellers
Sellers
was
played
fun.
good. Yeah.
I thought that one pick where he overthrew that guy, maybe it wasn't even the best like idea of a throw either. But boy, are things I think maybe looking in the right direction for that South Carolina program. For Kentucky, I'm not selling my stock in Kentucky. I took their over 6.5 win total. I'm gonna stick with that, but there needs to be better quarterback play by Brock Vandagriff because you're not gonna win football games with Gavin Wimsatt at quarterback. You're not gonna do it. And I know Rutgers can do it against Big Ten West teams. All right, just running the football, but I don't think Kentucky has the same rushing attack that they did last year either. So they need a quarterback to find ways to get touches to Barry Brown and the other talent that they have on that offense. I thought their defense was fine. I thought Kentucky played decent. And South Carolina scored 30 points because of that pick six, right? And some field position issues that the Kentucky defense was dealing with. So, yeah, like when you look at Kentucky as a team and you're looking at their schedule, obviously it's an SEC schedule, which, I'll say maybe I haven't been impressed with the bottom tier of the SEC so far. But you play against Georgia, you play against Ole Miss, you play against Florida on the road, Tennessee, Texas. Those are five pretty good teams, right? If you're going to win over 6.5 games, you can't lose all five of those games, right? Not to mention Louisville at home. So a Vanderbilt team that's looking a little bit frisky, a little bit frisky. So I am, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about, my bet of over 6.5 wins for Kentucky, but I'm not selling my Kentucky stock, though, if that makes sense.
No, no, I'm with you there. And I think it'll take time for Vandegrift and those guys to get settled in. I mean, he's a guy with, yes, he's older, but he doesn't have a ton of experience. I was disappointed in the lack of manufactured touches that you can get a guy like Barry Brown, Jamori Macklin, a one-on-one ball to Dane Key. I know that defensive line made things borderline impossible, but I do think there are ways to kind of move around that. But the reality is like South Carolina had like 240 yards and they scored 31 points. You mentioned the short fields they had. If you look at their scoring drives, right, that touchdown, they had it at the 40-yard, at 61-yard touchdown drive, right? So they had almost plus field position there. They had a 20-yard field goal drive. They had a 58-yard touchdown drive, a 43-yard touchdown drive, and then obviously the pick six. Yes, Sellers looked better, and I thought he looked. I was really impressed, and obviously Ashford is not the answer though. Sellers is the guy long term. He was efficient. He was on time with balls. It was good. It was good. But Raheem Sanders looked good. It was more about that defense, and that's how they're going to be winning games. That's how they're going to be doing it. The problem with that is the margin for error is tough, and that schedule is brutal. Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, Clemson gets their act together, and then you've got teams like A&M and Oklahoma and LSU next week. LSU game day, by the way, early 11 a.m. kickoff there for you, in South Carolina, in Columbia there, which will be awesome. But that's my only concern going forward is I would have liked a little bit more explosiveness. Now, part of that too is Kentucky's defensive line and Kentucky being good defensively. So I guess we'll see what happens against LSU. If I had to be nitpicky, because they did win by 25 on the road as basically almost 10-point dogs. So that that one's pretty awesome, obviously for South Carolina, and not to hang their hat on anything, but that D line was crazy. It was crazy. Vandergriff had zero chance. They were playing out of their freaking mind, and you were on it early. You were on it all off season. This South Carolina defensive line is different, and that's what their internal optimism was, for this staff to be able to compete and win every football game they play in because of that defensive line. And we'll just slowly bring along Sellers in that running game and hopefully that downfield passing game. will come, and then you'll be able to win some games against some really good football teams.
Because they have talent at receiver. It just hasn't been fully utilized yet. Like, where's Nick Harbor? Where's Gage Larvindane? Right, Jared Brown finally poked his head out this past game, but yeah, I think I think there's some talent here. I like Josh Simon as well, tight end there. So I'm very optimistic about this team. I'm not. I still have my questions about the offensive side of the football, but again, credit to South Carolina. And look, if they beat Vanderbilt to reach a bowl game, all you have to do is beat Akron, Wofford, and then one other SEC team, whether that's Texas A&M at home, whether that's LSU. Uh, there are some spots to be had that I think that they could make a bowl game.
And here's what I'll say too is we saw Alabama's offensive line struggle, right? We saw Oklahoma's offense struggle. We saw Clemson have their hands full with Georgia. And by the way, you know, you talked about South Carolina's defense being, up there with, your Texases and potentially Notre Dame's. But is it crazy that I almost feel better about South Carolina's defensive line than I do Georgia's? I don't know if that's blasphemy or
And Notre
not, but
Dame's defensive line, by the way.
yeah, yeah. So to me, that's a game that they could absolutely give Clemson struggles. It's going to be about how consistent, how explosive can you be with Sellers in this offense, and that's going to be the ceiling. Because if you are Ole Miss, if you're Alabama, LSU, Missouri, Clemson, Oklahoma, two teams with legit college football aspirations, you do not want to see South Carolina on your schedule. They are going to give you fits defensively with what they can do rushing the passer and hopefully and controlling the game in that aspect. And yeah, man, it's fun. It's a lot of fun to watch those guys really wreak havoc. And it's exactly why we don't make overreactions in week one, because this South Carolina team looked terrible offensively last week against Old Dominion. And obviously the defensive line looked really good that game too, but we saw it really come to fruition against Kentucky and just dominate.
Love it. That's going to be it for a week 2 recap there. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you can join us for week 3's previews. We're going to be giving out previews for a specific set of games that we want to talk about. We're going to be talking about Underdog Central Station, where we're going to be picking 10+ point underdogs to win outright. And then we're obviously going to have the counter, which is our best bets, which CD is going to bounce back this week. I know it's going to happen. So,
Oh yeah.
CD, anything for us on the way out?
No, I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed a great week 2. And listen, I know the headliners aren't there week 3, but there is a couple ranked matchups. There's some road games for some good football teams that they're going to be playing in. So obviously keep your eye out from. These are the weekends that surprise people. These are the weekends where people get got. We talk about. And so obviously we're going to be excited to preview them and obviously watch them this Saturday and Thursday and Friday as well.
Exactly. And we'll see y'all in the next one.